Welcome to my Master of Arts in Education journey. At UTSA, I'm working towards a goal of becoming a reading specialist. As an undergraduate student, a group of seniors put together a reading tutoring program to serve struggling readers. It was a successful program for both the struggling readers and the pre-service teachers. We were honored to speak about the program at the state reading conference that final spring. As a result of that experience, I knew on graduation day that what I was truly passionate about was helping students to learn how to be literate. This is me on graduation day. I went to work that fall teaching first grade at a local elementary school. The overall student population was probably around 60% African American and 40% Hispanic, with an at-risk percentage of over 97% due to poverty. The majority of our Hispanic students were enrolled in bilingual courses. That first year required a lot of on-the-job training to meet the needs of my students. I actively sought out help from my students, including setting up reading buddies for some students, and the result of the group effort was that every student finished the year reading on grade level. This success continued to fuel my passion. I became one of the campus technology experts and mentored a bilingual teacher through his American certification program. Some changes in my personal life would out of necessity pull me out of the classroom after just a few years. I moved to Minnesota to care for my elderly mother-in-law and had a son who was on the high-functioning end of the autistic spectrum. I worked a few different jobs in my time out of the classroom, including owning a small daycare center and managing an educational toy/teacher supply store. While I owned the daycare, I wrote a grant to the state of Minnesota, which successfully funded a large amount of tactile learning materials for my preschool enrollees. I had the opportunity to work with the federal school lunch program to provide nutritional balanced meals for daycare enrollees too. The desire to teach literacy has never left me, and last year my personal life finally felt like it was comfortable and stable enough for me to return to that goal of becoming a reading specialist. My teaching career and even my life sidetracks give me unique background knowledge and experience that has been helpful in principles of ILT and will be valuable as I transition back to teaching next fall. It is my belief that literacy is the educational piece that unlocks opportunity for students more than any other. Literacy truly does make the word come alive. Yet from our earliest studies in this course, we know that despite the United States having one of the best educated populations in the world by the 1940s, not all people had access to education. In 1954, Brown versus Board of Education made it illegal to deliberately segregate schools based on race. Schools struggled with fair implementation of this ruling, coming closest to fully integrated schools in the year 1988. Since then, segregation has grown farther apart. The achievement gap mirrors segregation, having come to its narrowest point in 1988, and since then has been growing again. Gloria Ladson Billings addresses the achievement gap, but her concept of debt is more alarming. The debt is the cumulative sum of all the yearly deficits, and students who come from marginalized populations can suffer greatly from this debt, making school achievement insurmountable. Having taught in a school serving a poor and minority population, this debt was on display every day. Students often came to school hungry and lacking sleep. Homelessness, violence, and hygiene were concerns for many students. Parents often did not understand how to help their children navigate the school system or help with their homework. Teachers dealt with many issues before teaching could take place. Ferrer's book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, can be thought of as a pedagogy for liberation of the oppressed. It documents how he assists sugarcane workers in Brazil to become literate. The real genius of his work is not education that lifts up the workers, but rather getting the workers to take ownership of their own education. In turn, the workers educate other workers, creating a movement lifting an entire oppressed population. Social justice in education is not simply understanding or agreeing with ideas, but an action that pays it forward for marginalized students to succeed. I tell my students on the first day of school that it is my job to help them go to college or achieve whatever personal goals they have. And for many, this is the first time they hear this kind of talk. Anion discusses how different social classes tend to be educated. Working class schools ask students to memorize information and offer them little chance to make decisions. Affluent professional schools ask students to work creatively and independently. An expression of ideas is valued. It's important to challenge students to achieve the highest levels and give them the creative room to explore. This requires that teachers allow for some chaos and also for teachers to take on a mentoring teaching style. For teachers who enjoy continual learning, this style of teaching can be a lot of fun and rather inspirational. Our course title, Principles of Interdisciplinary Learning and Teaching, certainly hinted at the importance of interdisciplinarity. This concept was introduced by Moran, who describes disciplines as the organization of knowledge and interdisciplinarity as the reorganization of this knowledge when the older ways have been outdated or have become exclusionary. While there was ebb and flow throughout time, this is similar to what students today can expect in higher education. Nassini discusses disciplines as self-contained academic islands. Perhaps it is because my BS degree is in interdisciplinary studies, but this type of isolation is hard to imagine outside of higher education and research. Guy coined the term discourse to mean a social language that groups speak, and this seems to hold more truth for the various academic disciplines than having them exist as self-contained islands. Interdisciplinarity can also be a vehicle for driving inquisitive thinking. This new way of considering an issue might well create new intellectual knowledge or even a new discipline by combining and clashing of multiple disciplines. Behaviorism, cognitivism, social constructivism, andragogy, situated learning, and constructionism were the 6 learning theories discussed in our course. Skinner suggests that behavior can be modified by positive and negative reinforcement. For behaviorism to have lasting effect in the classrooms, it must be meaningful for students, and it should create a lasting effect when the reinforcement is removed. Piaget viewed learning as a separate function that does not happen naturally, but happens because one is provoked. Equilibration is the driving force behind learning because it is that uncomfortable state that people don't enjoy when something new is presented. Vygotsky believed that from the moment a child is born, development and learning are happening in tandem. He theorized that a child's mental age could be determined by tasks they could do independently. The zone of proximal development reveals skills that are still in development, while mental age skills are skills that are already fully developed. Knowles coined the term andragogy to mean any form of adult learning. He believed adults were most interested in learning subjects that have immediate relevance and that learners should participate in the planning and evaluation of their instruction. When learning is embedded within activity, context, and culture, it is considered situated. Legitimate peripheral participation occurs in situated learning contexts, such as apprenticeships, and is the theory developed by Lav and Winger. Constructivism is the idea that people learn effectively through making mental models and discovery learning. Often when we think of diversity in education, we think of diversity of races or ethnicity. Educational diversity can be quite varied and include language, culture, sexuality, ability, age, and skill with technology. This often requires rethinking our roles as educators. Urban schools in particular struggle with how to improve literacy with student populations that are culturally diverse. Often, home discourses and school discourses are very different, and the goal should be to pull home discourses of different cultures into the school environment through an emphasis on oral storytelling, increased verbal interaction, and helping bilingual students to read and write in both languages. Sexual diversity refers to the sexual identities and orientations among society members. Supporting sexual diversity in education teaches about respect, safety, friendships, family dynamics, myths, stereotypes, and attitudes. Full inclusion of special needs students grew out of the social development theory and the civil rights movement. Placing a student into a full inclusion classroom without support is not enough. And ultimately, the key to the value of full inclusion is whether it is socially valuable to the student receiving services. Digital natives are native speakers in the language of technology, including computers, video games, and the internet. Giving students a voice by inviting them to bring technology to the discussion can be powerful. Using technology for organization and communication requires rethinking how things were done in the past. The concepts and theories discussed in ILT 5003 give me a strong framework to evaluate my teaching experience, giving voice and understanding to real-world experiences I have had. They allow me to critically reflect on my practice to become a better teacher. Many of my practices have been rooted in research and reflect best practices, but I see room for improvement, particularly in the area of making my classroom multi-ethnic and utilizing technology as a communication piece between parents, students, and myself. I'm also aware that collaboration with teachers can be far more than team lesson planning. It can be a place to learn together and advocate for our students. I am able to see how the various learning theories are reflected in my practices, and I have a deeper understanding of the history of our educational system. My short-term goals are to return as a primary grade classroom teacher for the 2018-2019 school year and to complete my Master of Arts degree in December of 2018. I will be able to take many of the key theories from principles of ILT with me, as Boerne ISD has an increasingly diverse learner population. 2 of their elementary campuses now have over 30% of their students considered economically disadvantaged. Currington Elementary has 7% student enrollment in special education programs, 15% student enrollment in English language learner programs, and 37% of students are African American, American Indian, Asian, Hispanic, Pacific Islander, or 2 or more races. I will advocate for my students to have a fair and equitable education, trying to close the achievement gap for students who suffer from educational debt. Because my students and their families come from a wide variety of backgrounds, I will create a welcoming and inviting classroom where diversity of all types is celebrated. I will teach in a manner that allows for a critical literacy lens and push students to produce work that involves application and creativity, working to ensure all students have access to books and technology. I will maintain open lines of communication and collaborate with parents, other teachers, and school administration. I will continue my education and participate actively in the International Literacy Association, the Texas Association of Literacy Educators, and Kappa Delta Pi. Thanks for listening.